I never thought I'd see the day my own family tried to burglarize my home, but that's exactly what happened. My sisters, their husbands, they didn't just cross a line. They shattered it. And what happened next? It ended with criminal charges and a family torn at the seams. It was July 8th, a sweltering Saturday drenched in sunshine and sweat. My mom decided to throw a big family barbecue at her house, the kind of event that's supposed to bring people together. I didn't want to go. I don't like my sisters, I sure as hell don't like their husbands and their kids. I'd rather wrestle raccoons. But my wife, ever the optimist, thought it would be good to show face. I didn't have the heart to say no. By the time we arrived, the backyard looked like the set of a low-budget family reality show. 25 people, buckets of cheap beer, kids running wild in swim diapers, and a pool shimmering under the merciless sun. My sisters, Danielle and Michelle, were already tipsy. Their husbands, Tony and Craig, were half sunk into lawn chairs like bloated lobsters. My mom was in full grandma zookeeper mode, wrangling 5 cousins under the age of 11. My dad laid back in the whirlpool section of the pool, clutching a beer cooler like it was his retirement plan. We tried to blend in. Made small talk. Had a margarita. Ate some grilled chicken. But within 5 minutes, Danielle was throwing shade about how we were late as usual, and too good to wear swimsuits. Typical. These are the same sisters who once asked if they could use my mountain cabin for a girls' weekend and then threw a tantrum when I said no. Then the chaos started. It began with 2 of the cousins sneaking up behind a neighbor and pushing her toward the pool. She stumbled in up to her waist, dripping wet and visibly annoyed. But instead of reprimanding the kids, Danielle and Michelle burst out laughing, like it was some YouTube prank. I tried to stay calm. I was leaning by the pool, half listening to some neighbor explain their new landscaping project, when I noticed 3 kids lining me up like I was the next victim. I sidestepped just in time, and they all went tumbling into the deep end. That's when the screaming started. The kids were thrashing around like someone dropped them in a shark tank. 2 of them clearly didn't know how to swim. People jumped in. Phones got ruined. My sisters started screeching like I'd thrown their kids in on purpose. One even screamed that I owed her $1,200 because her kid's iPhone sank like a stone. Tony, drunk off his face, tried to dive in to rescue someone, but tripped and smashed his face on the pavement. Blood. Yelling. Blame being tossed around like it was a football at Thanksgiving. I told them straight. Watch your own damn kids. I'm not your babysitter. That didn't go over well. They accused me of being smug. One said I was enjoying watching their kids suffer. That's when my wife grabbed my arm and whispered, "We're leaving. Right now." We drove off in silence. My dad never moved from the pool. And here's the kicker. That was just the beginning. What happened after? It blew the lid off a family secret I hadn't even known I was keeping. I thought the chaos at the barbecue was the worst of it. I thought we could just block their numbers and be done. I was wrong. What happened next made me realize just how far my sisters were willing to go for a few bucks, and how long they'd been hiding it from everyone. A week after the barbecue disaster, my mom called. I could tell right away something was wrong. Her voice had that tight, guilt-laced tone she used when she was trying to make excuses for someone else. "Honey, can we talk?" she said. "It's about Danielle and Michelle." Great. Turns out, while I was still nursing my headache from their meltdown, Danielle had spilled everything to my parents. She and Michelle had been secretly renting out my mountain vacation house for over 3 years. Without asking. Without telling anyone. They were pocketing thousands, anywhere from $1,800 to $3,500 a weekend, by pretending it was their own. My wife and I had bought that house years ago as a surprise gift for my parents. We covered the taxes, the maintenance, the upgrades, everything. But on paper, it was ours. My folks managed it, sure, but we never intended for anyone else to make money off it. Danielle told my parents she'd only done it because they were struggling financially. And yeah, she was desperate, maxed out credit cards, overdue car payments, even a looming repo on their luxury SUV. But here's the thing, when people are desperate, they usually ask for help. They don't commit fraud. Michelle, of course, denied everything at first. But then I remembered something that had never sat right with me. One weekend 2 summers ago, I dropped off a repaired ATV at the cabin. There was a family there, strangers, who said they were friends of the owner. I thought it was weird, but assumed my sister had let some acquaintances borrow the place. I never thought she was charging them. Now it made sense. When I confronted my parents, they looked exhausted. My mom's hands trembled as she stirred her coffee. My dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week. "We didn't know, son," he said. "And we're sorry. We should have caught it." I believed them. But that didn't change the rage building in my chest. The next day, Danielle and Michelle showed up at our doorstep. No call. No warning. Just 2 entitled women standing outside my house, arms crossed, expressions like they were the victims. My wife wasn't home, and I had a decision to make: slam the door in their faces, or hear them out. I chose the latter. I shouldn't have. They walked in like they owned the place. Sat on my couch. Started spinning some sob story about how the vacation house was meant to be for family, and how we should all benefit from it. Danielle even said I should help pay for her kids' college, because you don't even have children, and that's what family does. I stared at them, mouth open. I let them talk. And then I unloaded. "You lied," I said. "You stole. You broke trust. And now you're sitting here asking for more?" They denied it. Then cried. Then shouted. The air in the room turned toxic, thick with accusations and long-held grudges. At one point, Michelle screamed that I was selfish, and always thought I was better than them. I told her that if I was better, it was only because I didn't treat family like a wallet. They finally stormed out, slamming the door behind them. My hands were still shaking an hour later. And then, the final insult. That night, my wife and I started getting texts from unknown numbers. New ones. Different ones. Google Voice, probably. Messages begging, guilt-tripping, even threatening. "You'll regret this. Think about Mom and Dad. Don't be the reason the family falls apart." That's when it clicked. They weren't sorry. They were just scared they'd lost access to their free vacation piggy bank. I didn't know it then, but this story was about to explode into something even darker. Theft, betrayal, and eventually, arrest warrants. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Danielle pocketing hundreds of dollars from strangers staying in my house, our parents' house, while smiling to my face like nothing was wrong. It wasn't just theft. It was betrayal layered in years of fake smiles and passive-aggressive texts. I started to wonder, had I ever really known them? The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove up to the mountain house alone. It's a quiet 2-hour drive, winding through pine-covered hills and valleys that always made me feel like I was escaping real life. That house was supposed to be a retreat, a place where my parents could slow down and drink wine on the porch. I remembered how my mom had cried the day I handed her the keys. My dad, normally the stoic one, hugged me twice. But when I pulled up that morning, all I could see was damage. The chain on the gate was snapped. The keypad was scratched up like someone had tried to pry it off. And worst of all, muddy footprints led around the side to the barn. They'd broken in. I locked everything. Changed every code. Installed cameras inside and out. And then I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring at the view, and remembered something that hit me like a punch to the gut. When I was 16, I'd saved for months to buy a used guitar. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and I loved it. One day, I came home to find Danielle, already in her 20s at the time, loaning it to her boyfriend because he had a gig and really needed one. I begged her to get it back. She told me to stop being dramatic. The guy sold it a week later. That day I learned something. Danielle never asked, she just took. The difference was, back then, I was a teenager with no power. Now I own the deed to the house they were looting like a side hustle. Later that afternoon, I got a call from my dad. He sounded defeated. They're trying to get us to convince you to let them use the house again, he said. I told them no. We're done being in the middle. That meant everything to me. My parents, who had always played peacemakers, were finally drawing a line. That night, my dad drove up to meet me. We had a beer on the porch, just the two of us. He told me he was changing the narrative. No more excuses. No more covering. And then he said something that made my chest tighten. You gave us this place. You trusted us with it. I should have protected it better. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about property. It was about dignity. About standing up to people who believed they were entitled to whatever you had. The next day, both brothers-in-law called my office. Tony tried to joke his way through it, said they'd accidentally ended up locked out while bringing friends for a weekend getaway. Claimed I was messing with their income. When I told him they were done using the house, forever, he threatened to rip the gate out of the damn ground. Craig was more sheepish, clearly calling on Michelle's orders. When I told him the same thing, he didn't argue. But I knew they wouldn't stop. Not until something truly forced them to. And just days later, they proved me right, by breaking into the house again. Only this time, they got caught. It happened the Friday after Thanksgiving. While most people were still wrestling with leftover stuffing and family awkwardness, my brothers-in-law were grinding through the chain on my vacation home's front gate with a power tool. Yeah. An angle grinder. They weren't subtle. They weren't scared. They were desperate. I didn't find out until that evening, when my wife and I came home from dinner with her parents. I had left my phone in the car all day to enjoy some peace for once. No buzzing, no drama. But when I checked it, there were 9 missed calls from my property manager Mike, 5 from the sheriff's office, and texts from both. My stomach dropped. I didn't even read the messages at first. I just called Mike. They're in custody, he said. They broke into the house. I got the alert from the cameras, called the deputies, and they caught them walking out the front door. For a moment, I was speechless. Then the adrenaline hit. Mike told me they'd destroyed the lock on the gate, tried forcing open the front door, failed, and ended up breaking in through an interior utility door. They even forced open the barn, probably looking for the 6-seater ATV my dad and I used for trails. And in a final display of brilliance, they threatened to beat me up. In front of the cops. By the time I got off the phone, my heart was pounding like a drumline. I called the sheriff's office and made it crystal clear, press all charges. Trespassing. Property damage. Threats. I wanted it all documented. I wasn't backing down. They stayed in custody through the weekend. Small town. Holiday. No bail judge till Monday. That must have driven Danielle and Michelle wild. I didn't hear from them, because I had blocked them. But my parents did. And they called me, voices shaking. They said it was all a mistake. My mom said, tears in her voice. They want you to drop the charges. No, I said. Not this time. And for once, my dad agreed. They need to feel the consequences, he said. We've shielded them too long. I barely slept that weekend. I kept picturing them walking into that house like it was theirs. Touching things that belonged to my parents. Treating my gift like a pawn shop. On Sunday, I took a drive to clear my head. I didn't even listen to music. Just let the wheels turn and tried to make sense of how we got here. By the time I got home, I had made my decision. This wasn't about money. This was about control. About breaking the pattern. I was going to lawyer up and see how far I could take this. Not out of revenge, but out of necessity. By Monday, I had appointments booked with 2 attorneys and a quote from Mike on the damage. My wife, usually the peacemaker, didn't argue. She'd had enough too. Whatever you decide, she told me. Make sure they never forget this. And then, just when I thought they might finally stay quiet, I got a call. From a courier. He delivered an envelope to my office. Inside, a $5,000 cashier's check, and a handwritten letter. Signed by both Tony and Craig. They admitted everything. Apologized. Said they'd pay for any damages. Promised never to set foot on the property again unless invited. Begged me to help get the charges dropped. Said they might lose their jobs. And just like that, everything shifted again. They'd finally realized the stakes. But it was too little, too late. I held that envelope in my hands for what felt like forever. The $5,000 cashier's check was neat and cold, but the letter? That was messy. Raw. Desperate. My brothers-in-law weren't just apologizing, they were bargaining for their futures. And that's when it hit me. They finally understood what they'd done. They hadn't just broken into a house. They had fractured a family. Violated a gift. Exploited years of goodwill. And now, they wanted forgiveness, because it was convenient. I wasn't ready to offer that. My lawyer, a man named Gregory who had seen 100 ugly family blow-ups, read the letter silently, then looked up and said, "We don't have to accept anything. But if you want this to end, we can draft a release agreement, with teeth." He was right. I could sue. Drag this out for 2 years. Collect judgments they'd never be able to pay. Or I could end it now and let the weight of their own guilt do the rest. By Monday, the documents were ready. The brothers-in-law were forced to hire separate attorneys, expensive ones. Gregory made it clear, $33,000 in legal fees, damages, emotional distress, trespassing, unauthorized rentals, and more. Take it or face a lawsuit. They tried to haggle. I didn't budge. Finally, Craig, Michelle's husband, snapped during the negotiations. Told everyone to shut up. Said he'd sign, and they could deal with him later. He handed over another $2,500, claiming it was all they had left. That was their final payment. The moment it hit my lawyer's hands, I signed. The agreement is airtight. No contact. No visits to the vacation home, ever again. No future claims. If we're in the same place, they leave. Any violation? We go straight to court. I visited the house that afternoon. Mike had finished most of the repairs. It looked peaceful again. I walked the porch, looked out at the hills, and tried to feel what I'd hoped to feel, relief. But instead, I just felt tired. I stopped by the district attorney's office the next morning. Explained the situation. They agreed to reduce the charges to a Class 2 misdemeanor, trespassing only. The others were dropped on the condition that Tony and Craig pled guilty, paid fines, and never pulled this crap again. It wasn't justice in the dramatic, Hollywood sense. But it was clean. Legal. Final. That night, my wife and I ate dinner in silence. At one point, she reached across the table and said, "You did the right thing." And for the first time in months, I believed her. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life. Protecting what mattered. And learning, painfully, that sometimes family doesn't deserve a second chance. As of now, I haven't spoken to my sisters. I probably never will again. My parents know the basics, but I spared them the darker details. They don't need more sadness. Just peace. Funny enough, the fantasy I keep returning to now? It isn't revenge. It's silence. A year without drama. A holiday without lies. A life where I never have to explain why my kindness had limits.